Dr. Brandon,
Dr. Morgentaler.
how great to be with you today.
And it's great to be with you too.
So, we have a new podcast,
Yeah.
and I thought it would be great if you could help explain, not only to me, but to everybody watching, about what's the story with open relationships. What are they? What are they good for? When do you recommend that people open up their relationships when they come to you in therapy?
Yeah.
What can you tell us?
Before we start, a small disclaimer. The Sex Doctors podcast is not a substitute for medical or psychological advice.
Well, so open relationships is a word that encompasses a whole lot of different types of relationships. People often just assume that an open relationship means that everybody just has sex with whoever they want.
Right.
Now, that's a subset of open relationships, but I wouldn't say that it's the majority. Now, I actually have not seen a survey of how people break their open relationships down, so I can't tell you like what percentage, but I can tell you with the couples I've worked with over time, and I've worked with couples that either are trying to open their relationship or have an open relationship. I've worked with them for decades, and I'm actually not sure that there has been a couple that had that it's a free-for-all situation. There might have been, and I've forgotten that.
Yeah. So that's an important point, because I have to tell you, I don't have any special expertise in this. And, just as a layperson, when I hear open relationships, that's what I think of. I think everybody's allowed. There's a couple, maybe they live together, maybe they're married, but if they have an open relationship, it means that everybody can sleep with whoever they want. And you're saying that's not really what it is.
Well, I would say for most people, that's not what it is, just based on what I see in my practice.
So can you give some examples of what you have seen?
So I think it's more common for couples to, actually it's more common for couples to kind of want to see if open relationships are for them. And then actually, at least in my practice, they decide no.
Uh-huh.
So there's more curiosity about it and willingness to experiment than there is a sort of shift from monogamous to open that I've seen. I mean, more people are curious about it than actually go through with it.
Right. So not to go along with any stereotypes, but I would imagine that it's the men that are more interested in opening up a relationship.
That is not the case.
Huh.
Now, I wouldn't say it's more the women. I would not say that. But I would not say it's more the men.
Not exclusively a male thing.
No, it really isn't. And actually, it's easier if a couple decides to open their relationship and they set whatever rules they set. It's easier for the woman to find a partner than it is the guy generally.
Ooh.
Yeah. And that's I've seen that over and over again.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
Well,
why is it easier for the woman to find a new partner than the man?
Well, because it's super easy for women to get laid. Like super. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
That's how it is.
Right. Right.
And so the people they're having sex with are much less going to a headspace of, but you have another partner, or
right.
Worried they're going to fall in love and then what's going to happen.
Right.
That in general, it's easier for a woman to find a partner who is like, oh, you have a husband, no problem. That even turns me on.
Yeah. And you're saying that the converse, that if the guy tries to meet a woman and she says, wait, you're married? Why would I want to get involved with that, right?
Exactly. And you can understand that from a variety of perspectives, including she's the one that risks getting pregnant.
Yeah.
And I think from an evolutionary perspective, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So
I think you're also saying that men are less discriminating.
I am saying that as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a world of men that might be willing to have sex with a woman who's opened up their relationship, rather compared to you get what
I wouldn't say world.
Yeah, not a world. Yeah, too many people in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But
all right.
so it's often a shock to the guys,
right?
Because they often think that they're embarking on some like really easy process of having this amazing sex life, and it doesn't necessarily unfold like that for them. What I often suggest that they do is they go on one of those websites like Ashley Madison that is for people who are already partnered. So, there aren't as many women on that site, but at least the women on that site are prepared to be with a partnered guy.
Right.
Now, she might be having an affair and he's got to be willing to deal with the ethics or morals of that person.
Yeah.
But that's an easier way. Now, keeping in mind, though, that on those sites, they're primarily populated by guys.
Right.
So it's not easy to
Right.
find a woman on those sites, but it might be easier, at least as he gets started, to find that woman. Now, as dating apps have certain dating apps have branched out into different relationships, it's easier than it used to be because dating apps can accommodate for this to a certain degree, some apps at least.
Right.
So it's getting easier. I wouldn't say the opposite is true.
So you mentioned that couples come to you interested in exploring the idea of an open relationship. So what might get them to that point?
I think that people are more and more aware that sex in a long-term relationship with the same partner is rather challenging, that this expectation that sex remains like super amazing for decades is pretty difficult for a lot of people to realize. And so people are wondering if there's more for them if they kind of become more flexible with the relationship.
Yeah.
And oftentimes they have this conversation before they're married, and then it comes back a few years later. Maybe we should talk to a therapist about this. And the other one says, well, I don't really like that idea anymore. We talked about this before we were married.
Right.
And then the first one will say, well, let's just go talk to somebody and see what happens.
So, yeah. So, call me old fashioned, but, the thing that I'm familiar with is monogamy, right? And I think, if I'm not mistaken, you wrote a book on this.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Oh, my goodness. It turns out I got a copy right here. Monogamy. Yeah. The Untold Story. So
can I say that's an academic book, and it's expensive. I wrote that for therapists. People can get it and they can find it on Amazon.
Babe, you're totally worth it.
They're gonna be like, I can't believe the cost of this book. But it's an academic publisher.
You're totally worth it.
But so say why I wrote that? I wrote that because I wrote a book with a gynecologist about low libido in women.
Yeah.
And we never talked about this issue of low libido related to challenges with monogamy. And I thought, you know what?
Can you explain that?
Yeah. So for the people that are challenged by having one partner over time, the way their bodies might deal with that is just sort of sexually shut down.
You're talking about the men or the women?
Anybody.
Anybody, men or women.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, that's not the case for everybody. So everything I say, there's a subpopulation
of course.
People.
Of course.
But I felt like as therapists, we were not dealing with this monogamy challenge. That's what I call it.
Right.
Okay. So I decided to break out into that world, and open relationships is just sort of a potential solution for some people who are challenged by monogamy. People will say to me, I'd rather have rules to open the relationship than have my partner cheat or cheat.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Everybody's in agreement.
Yeah. So how do you handle it? So a couple comes to you, and maybe one, maybe both are sort of curious about this idea of opening up the relationship. So what do you do in that behind the closed door with that couple?
So usually one person is more eager to try this than the other. That's just almost
sure.
The case.
I can see that.
So step one is we agree that the person that's less enthusiastic gets to set all the rules. And opening a relationship generally requires quite a bit of discussion and agreement as to what the rules are going to be. So point one is that's who sets the rules, and that's who says let's try it, and that's who says we're done trying it. And the person that's more enthusiastic kind of just has to agree.
That's the less enthusiastic partner.
Yeah.
Yeah. You need to empower that person.
Exactly.
Right. And
that's the only way they're going to feel safe enough if they're not real enthusiastic.
And the rules that you're talking about, can you give some example of what those rules can be?
Yeah. You know what I feel like I should say before I forget to say that people really need a solid relationship before they even start this process with me or with anybody. So if people are looking to open their relationship because they're not feeling good with their partner in whatever way, that's just going to explode in your face.
Yeah. It seems to me it could be a recipe for disaster.
Right.
Under
even for couples that are really connected.
Yeah, under most circumstances.
Exactly.
Right. So actually, before we get to rules, can you just say a little bit about when you think it's appropriate to do this?
Well, that's
when do you recommend it?
I don't know that I've recommended it. Like, I'm a therapist. I'm recommending that you explore open relationships.
Right. You don't do that.
I don't. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
But what I'm sure that I've said is if I'm dealing with a couple where someone's been unfaithful and they're trying to figure out what options they might have together, I would probably throw that out as, some people think about this, but I would never say I recommend it.
I see.
I wouldn't say that just because it is totally filled with landmines.
Yeah.
Now, it can work, absolutely, but I don't know who it's going to work for.
And when you say it can work,
Mm.
meaning that the marriage or the relationship doesn't completely explode.
Oh,
Is that what you mean?
yeah, I have couples that I have seen over decades periodically, like skip a year and then they're back because they ran into a little tricky thing. Skip 5 years, then they're back. That's kind of what I mean by over time. But
Right.
yeah, I've got couples that have made it work over time. I mean, it's a cool thing to see. I really enjoy working with them because they have a certain maturity in that relationship. Not like it's just one. Those folks have generally quite a maturity. They know when to slow down and reassess. That's generally when they call me. Or they're they're going through some sort of major shift and it feels a little tricky. They call me. So these are mature people, and they tend to get pleasure out of their partner's pleasure. So that's like a sweet thing to see, that they'll acknowledge that things are difficult. They don't necessarily pretend it's all great, but they tend to say this is better than the alternative, and they focus on what is good about it. Like they'll focus on feeling pleasure when their partner is happy, that sort of stuff. So they strike me generally, these couples that make this work over time, as a real healthy group. And research shows that they don't have any different kinds of psychology than people who don't do monogamous people. And they're not lower or even necessarily higher in sexual satisfaction than monogamous people. So the take-home message there is they're not like different. So they have the same amount of history of like sexual abuse or the same amount of mental illness, depression, stress, whatever, as everybody else. So it's just a certain type of person that can make it work.
Right.
And I think that I say that they tend to be healthy because their communication is outstanding. If this is working over time, their communication is superb. They've got real connection in their marriage. It generally can include sex, but not always. But there's a real connection. It's not like a business relationship kind of.
And this is different than swinging.
Yeah, but that's a whole interesting topic in and of itself. Those folks are also fun to work with. They tend to be pretty outgoing, and they tend to be like fun people. And again, like the ones that make swinging work, I mean, they're fun to be around. They're like the funnest at the party, and they're like that in your therapy room too. They're just fun people in general. Now, I'm exaggerating to a certain degree, but you know what I would say? We should do a different podcast on swinging in particular. But if we're going to just sort of group all this together just for today, if you're thinking about it, one of the first things I would suggest, if both partners are in agreement, is go online and find a couple to talk to, because these communities often are very willing and happy to share their experiences and talk to others, because many people in these communities know this is not simple.
Right.
Like they're not kidding themselves.
Right.
But they also often say this is better than the alternative of divorce or the alternative of a sexless marriage. Like they'll say that this is the best of all alternatives.
I would think that one of the alternatives is that one of the partners is just going to cheat and not tell the other person.
Right.
Right. And then it feels like some trust is violated. Not just that somebody had sex with another person outside the marriage or relationship, but also that they just feel violated. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you talked about rules a minute ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like what kind of rules so you said the less enthusiastic partner gets to set the rules. So can you give some examples of what rules might be?
So generally rules right off the bat are nobody has intercourse. That's a common one. You can't fall in love. If you feel like you're actually falling for this person, you have to call it quits. Like these are common rules.
Now, hold on a second. Nobody has intercourse. I thought the point of the opening the relationship was for intercourse.
Well, they might get there, but generally starting rules are no intercourse, because basically what happens is people have to feel their way into this territory and see what does make sense to them. And most of the time they don't know what makes sense.
I see. So if they're not having intercourse, what are they allowed to do?
Well, generally, I encourage experimentation when the couple's together so that they can sort of see each other, read each other, and manage the situation accordingly. So rather than split up and go do one thing and go do one, everybody works together here at first and ventures into this uncertainty. So, like, one way to do it could be go to a bar if you're willing, have one person watch and the other one, like, start flirting with other people at the bar. How'd that go? So that's an easy start. Now, not everybody likes that because they sort of feel like they're taking advantage of people at the bar to experiment on, which is true. So, I mean, I guess you could, it makes sense to me that feels like that. So not everybody likes that. So another place to experiment would be go to a swingers club. I mean, they're all over the place. You just, find online what's around, and then agree you're not going to do anything except talk to people, and then go in there together and just see what it's like to watch other people fooling around, to just sort of, kind of like see what the general lay of the land is in a situation like that, and then come back to my office and talk about it. So everybody agrees there's no kissing, there's no touching, but then let's just discuss what that was like. And we take it like one little step at a time.
Oh, that must be fascinating. I got to tell you, I think that I'd like to be a fly on that wall and hear you talk to people about them. So, like, can you, give us some color here?
Yep.
Like, so a couple does that. They come back, and what do you ask them?
But usually they have a lot to say.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't think it's not a situation of me asking them.
Right.
I mean, it might say how to go.
Right.
But generally, they're just ready. They're just so ready to talk. And oftentimes somebody's offended, something went wrong.
Yeah.
And so we have to talk that through. And are they still willing to try this again and maybe slow it down? Or this is a failed experiment already?
Yeah.
Like, these are the kinds of things that we talk about. And it might be that it's really unclear. And so they might do that same thing 5 times until they decide we can go one step further, or we take one step back.
Yeah. Help me out here, because I think I'm probably still stuck in traditional mode. So my mindset as I'm listening to and thinking about this is that this is the alternative for a relationship where one of the couple wants to actually be having sex with somebody else or with other people because their own sex life isn't working that well, or there's something they don't like about it, or they're in a rut or whatever. It's just exciting to, usually I can imagine, with one partner, and the other partner has to go along. But I think if I'm hearing you right, there's more to this than that.
I think definitely more to this than that. It's a subgroup of people, but definitely more to it than that. And sometimes it's not that their sex isn't good. It's just that they feel like they live once, they want to see how they can make life better.
Yeah.
So that, I think, is also a myth, that people try this because their sex life isn't good. Often they'll both say to me, our sex life is great.
Huh.
So it can be that. And it can also be people who feel like, it's not about sex at all, but just being creative in the world. Like, so it's just many different types of people, and they come to this situation from different places, even within the couple. So that's, I think, the art of it is to find the middle ground if we can. I mean, sometimes it's sext somebody you used to date, 2 decades ago. Start sexting, see how that feels to your partner. How's that feel to you? Can you bring the excitement of that sexting with this person you used to know back into your relationship to make your sex better? Like, there are just so many ways to go about this. There can be go have a threesome. So agree, you're going to have a threesome. We have a heterosexual couple I'm working with, have a threesome with the woman, have a threesome with the guy. That's not that hard to find with the dating apps the way they are. And then let's talk about how they went. Like, we'll talk about each of these threesomes and how that felt. So the more they're willing to experiment, the stronger this is going to be for them as they move forward. You see, so the more different situations they put themselves in gives us a lot to talk about. And like I said, they might do one thing and we talk about it for months, until everybody's sure that it's time to go forward or back.
What a fascinating world we live in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And most of this goes below the radar, certainly below my radar.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think that that's right. That there's a lot of people that have non-traditional marriage contracts that nobody knows about.
Right.
Even the contract, which is, I would say to you, more common than people realize. Don't tell me what you do on your business trips. I don't want to know. But it's an agreed upon, like, part of the
Well,
marriage contract.
yeah.
You know, you do what you want. Just
Yeah.
don't tell me, and don't do it in this state. Don't do it in this city. I hear that too. So, you know, it's any number of things.
I learned so much from you. It's like somebody who's got sees the world in black and white, and all of a sudden they see, they're exposed to colors or something. Wow, that's really going on. Amazing. Dr. Brandon,
Yes.
I think you've done a service to everybody that's listening to this. What an interesting thing and a different idea for a lot of people. I'm sure there are people who are watching or listening who have never thought seriously about any of this, where it might actually be an option that could help them.
Right. And you know what? If they find that it's not an option that can help them, they still might be able to make use of these concepts, just not in real life. So
Yeah.
fantasize about it. So can they talk each other through a fantasy of this situation?
Yeah.
You know, so if this works for somebody and doesn't work for somebody else, I mean, I'm apt to look and see where the compromise lies. And there might be a compromise without any interaction with another human being.
Yeah.
But it might be a compromise in fantasy or in some kind of sex play of some kind. Like, well, can you pretend you're someone else and have sex with your partner? Can you wear a wig and have sex with your partner? Like, there's a million ways to play with this kind of energy. So
Yeah.
I'm saying this because if couples listening and one person's like, no way, I'm not doing it. Well, maybe they can wear a wig, or, you know what I mean?
Right. Be a
It's
different
still-
personality.
Right.
Right?
So there's a lot to do here.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of options.
Super. Dr. Brandon, thus ends another one of the podcasts of the Sex Doctors.
Yes. And we should ask people, I always forget to do this, like, please review us and subscribe.
Yeah, of course.
We will read the reviews.
Yeah.
And we would like to see what.
And ask questions. Well, I think there's nothing left to do but to say adieu and hope to see you all again at the next podcast of the Sex Doctors.